Hey folks, I'm Jack Fossett, and welcome to this demo and review of the D'Angelico Premier DC Semi-hollow electric guitar. So let me start by saying that I'm pleasantly surprised with how much I like this guitar. The first thing that stood out to me is it's very, very heavy. And I hadn't read up on the specs on it at first, and it turns out that it is very heavy because this is a maple guitar. And the weight is not to the point where it would bother me. It is something to be aware of if you really want to, get this guitar. The positive thing about maple is you get great sustain, but still with a snap. So it's kind of a, you get these notes that just have a sharp edge. A lot of times with tone woods, kind of the more sustain and warmth you have, you lose a little bit of top. Maple is the exception to that. The reason that you don't see as many guitars in maple is it can be very bright and it is very, very heavy. It's part of why Les Pauls are so heavy. Well, this is a heavy guitar, but it really has that great, beautiful tone. And the tone seems to suit the brand, if that makes sense. D'Angelico has a long history as one of the great American guitar builders. It has this it distorts really well. You can play great rock stuff with it and everything. You can certainly play blues with it, but it also just has this beautiful, snappy, airy, jazzy tone. And that's a hard tone to come by. A lot of people like to say, if you want to get a good jazz guitar tone, just roll your tone knob off. And that's very, very poor understanding of a good jazz tone. A good jazz tone generally comes from either a hollow or a semi-hollow guitar, and it has a lot to do with the resonance of the guitar. And again, that kind of there's this body and there's airiness to it, but there's this light sort of snap on top, and which can be adjusted with the tone knob. So this guitar, based on the price point, I wasn't really expecting that much. It's a consumer level there. This particular one is $6.99 new. This is this is a Premier DC. This one has the stairway sort of Art Deco tailpiece, which is really nice. And again, that really suits the headstock, which is the classic D'Angelico headstock. It's got the fancy Art Deco tuners and everything. It kind of has the Manhattan skyline truss rod cover and the nice inlays and everything. The whole thing just screams, New York nightclub. It's a flashy guitar. It looks nice. The finish is nice. The binding is nice. Now, one of the other things, as far as, again, kind of knowing what to expect when you look at guitars that are this price point, usually one of the things I expect is for it to be kind of dark and muddy sounding, particularly for semi-hollow body guitars. This one is not, I think, partially because of the maple. But oddly enough, it is darker, and I can probably from the electronics, but then the maple compensates for that. So it sat in a nice range. I did turn the tone up on the amp a little bit more than I would on another guitar, which lends me to think, again, maybe it would be a little bit darker, muddier if it weren't for the maple. But, I found it just had it did have a nice tone that sat really well. And I liked the responsiveness of it and everything. And again, so that's just something to be aware of. You might have to maybe turn the treble up a little bit more on an amp than you would another guitar, but it's not a criticism. It's just kind of an understanding of where this sits tonally. It is semi-hollow, so it has a big center block. Again, that also kind of leads to some of the weight on it. It doesn't feel cheap. A lot of consumer brand guitars kind of feel cheap and feel sort of pleeky and things. This doesn't feel cheap. The tuners are really smooth. They look fancy, of course, which is great, but they're also really smooth, and it held tune really well, which I liked, despite the nut. And this is, again, and it's not a criticism, it's just something to be aware of. The nut, my guess would be, is a lower material, and it wasn't cut quite perfectly, so it did have that thing on the G string where when you're tuning it, you do a couple of little turns and it's not going anywhere, and then all of a sudden you hear like a sort of thing and it jumps up a little bit. That's very, very typical of guitars in this price range. I wouldn't expect anything else. So again, it's not a criticism. It is something to be aware of. The humbuckers are Duncan designed humbuckers. I liked how they sounded. They distorted really well. They didn't sound muddy. Again, kind of going back to the tone in general. I thought they had a nice range. They weren't giving me harsh frequencies that I didn't like, but they weren't giving me anything dull. The finish is kind of a translucent, this is a wine red, and you can see the wood grain if you look close. I don't believe that's really going to show up very well on the videos, but you can see the wood grain, so that's nice. And of course it has the Art Deco sort of style pickguard. The frets are real smooth. They're, you know, no sharp edges or anything. The action is good, and it's not like any sort of crazy warbliness on the neck. So all in all, I think it's a classy guitar. I think it's a great buy, to be honest. I think it more than stacks up against other semi-hollow guitars in its price range. It has its own character due to the maple, and again, you know, like I said, the tone almost represents the brand. Typical with semi-hollow body guitars, if you're going to use a lot of gain and you're playing in small rock clubs, you got to be aware of feedback. But for the most part, if you're playing blues up to classic rock and you're playing, you know, mid-sized venues and up, you're really not going to have a problem with feedback. I don't think. You know, you might have spots where you feedback, you roll off the volume, you turn the guitar a little. Again, it's just something to be aware of. If you're a semi-hollow guitar player, you probably understand this already. So these are Indonesian made. They come with a gig bag. It's a really nice gig bag. It's not a flimsy gig bag at all. The F holes are bound. I mean, you know, I just think it's a good buy for what it is and everything. Now for this demo, I'm going to be playing into a new amp, which I'm really excited about. It's a Franklyn Amps Tweed 57 5E3, and that's this one right here. It is a hand-wired 5E3. It's a head combo. It's a combo head. It's a head, but it also has a little 8-inch speaker in it, so you can actually run it as a combo, or you can plug it out to an external speaker cab. I am going into this. This is an Eminence speaker cab, which is loaded with an Alessandro and an RF10 dual 10-inch speakers. This amp is phenomenal. It is one of the best Tweed amps that I've played, and I've played some Tweed amps, and it's under $1,000. I'm going to be doing a full review of that amp coming up, but one of the things I like about that amp in particular is it really gives you the beautiful clear tone of what your guitar should sound like. So you plug this guitar into it, and it's going to be a great representation, kind of a high-end representation of what this guitar can really do. Now I'm using a one-control Prussian blue reverb to add a little bit of air to the tone, and for the overdriven tones you are hearing a Wampler Tumnus Deluxe, so that's a pretty transparent overdrive, and I'm going to be using that for the overdriven tones. So let me know, what do you think of the D'Angelico guitars? Do you own any of the new ones? The revamping of the name D'Angelico is relatively new. It's been around for, I think, maybe 4 years now, would be, as I recall. I think it was 2015 when they burst back onto the scene and kind of revived the name. Do you own any of these? Have you played any of them? Have you tried the Premier series? They come in different models too. You can get one that instead of having this kind of Art Deco tailpiece, it has a stop bar tailpiece. You can get models that have P90s. The next level up from the Premier is the XL. There's all kinds of different models that they have, but they're again, they're cool guitars. They have a lot of sort of sophisticated Americana vibe, which I really like. So let us know what's your opinion of these guitars. What genre do you use them for? Because I think that's one of the big things, one of the big visions of the company now is to, you know, make great guitars that can still be used for jazz, of course, because traditionally they'd be used for jazz. But I think they're really trying to bust into other genres as well, you know, modern genres, indie genres, rock genres, certainly blues and everything. So do you have one? Do you want one? What kind of music do you play? Let us know in the comments. I'm Jack Fossett. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.